Abu Dhabi is a city that's so misunderstood by many investors in the UAE. All of the eyes are on Dubai and Ras Al Khaimah, but Abu Dhabi has been building something quite incredible over the last 20 years. So today we are going to take a trip down memory lane and look at the 2030 master plan of Abu Dhabi, which was written in 2007, so almost 20 years ago. Now, this is actually a quote from the first page of the 2030 plan. Those who forget their past compromise their future. Now, what you need to understand is that this master plan is not a developer's wish list, it's actually a government directive. So it was published in 2007, it's 185 pages of detailed blueprint, and it goes through a 25-year horizon. And it was actually approved at the highest level, chaired by Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, now the president of the UAE. So the man who is leading this country today actually personally oversaw the design sessions and helped to produce this document. This is how the cover of it looks. It's very long and I tried to go through most of it, so I hope you are going to appreciate the fact that you can get all of the most important information as a real estate investor in a short video. What is the scope of this document? Well, it covers the island of Abu Dhabi, the mainland city, the coastal corridor, the protected outer islands, and basically it's a plan designed to handle as a baseline 3 million people, the working population, and the upper limit that it was designed for was 5 million people, and this was actually labeled as overly optimistic in the plan. Now, funny enough, Abu Dhabi is currently tracking towards the upper limit scenario already, even 4 years before 2030. And what's important to know is that basically every single number that you're going to see in this master plan that was labeled as optimistic for the future is either already beaten or is being beaten by 2030. Now, this is important to know because history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes, right? So why would you want to bet against a city that, despite all of the crises that have been happening in the last 2 decades, have been constantly pushing the bar more and more and overcoming all of the different challenges? An interesting part I found in this document was the land reality. So this is why scarcity in Abu Dhabi isn't a policy, it's geography. Most of the emirate cannot be built on. This is actually said in this master plan, right? So 85% of the emirate is desert sand where you don't really want to be building and living. And a further 7% is shabka, basically coastal salt flats that flood, crossed over, and are nearly impossible to be built on. So that leaves us with a very small percentage of the emirate that's actually habitable. So this is how the emirate looks as a whole. It makes up the majority of the UAE's land area, but the actual parts where you can live and where you would want to live are a pretty small portion of this land. So when people ask why Abu Dhabi property holds value, the answer actually starts with geography and not just policy, right? The plan's job wasn't to create scarcity, it was to manage something that was always scarce to begin with. So let's look at the 2007 targets, and these are just 6 headline numbers that the city planned when they had barely 1 million people, actually less than 1 million people. In 2007, they had 930,000 population, and the 2030 target was 3.1 million. So they wanted to 3.3x their population. Now we are already way past that. The amount of tourists they wanted to hit was 7.9 million tourists per year by 2030. So they wanted to do a 4.4x. Again, we've already way pressed that. The amount of hotel rooms that they wanted to have was 74,500, so a 7.5x. The amount of office space they wanted to create was 7.5 million square meters. The amount of homes they wanted to increase from 180,000 to almost 700,000. And they wanted to go from having 3 golf courses to 25 golf courses. Now, an interesting thing is that the plan also notes that the golf courses actually increase the value of residential and resort property that's close to it. Here's the scorecard. Here's where it actually stands against its own targets today. Again, the population target has been exceeded 4 years early. The tourism target has been also lapped 3 times over. So in 2025, we had 26.6 million visitors and 9.1 billion dirhams of hotel revenue. Diversification. This is also a big part of the 2030 master plan, to not just have all the revenue come from oil. If you take a look at these numbers, amount of non-oil share of GDP was 54.7% in 2024. What this means is that, less than half of the GDP was actually coming from oil 2 years ago, which is really good. Again, the plan explicitly said that they want to reduce dependence on oil, and they managed to actually make a lot of progress towards that. Then real estate. So real estate is up a lot, obviously, from 2007. And the good thing about it that I find really interesting is that it's very much so cash-driven demand and not built on cheap credit. So the market is not going to collapse when interest rates rise a bit or the economy takes a little bit of a downturn. Now, if we are looking at office space, the market is essentially full. So the current supply is 3.4 million square meters of office space, and they are tracking a little bit behind the 2030 target here. The occupancy is 97% for office space, so the market is essentially full, and this is also a reason why they actually announced a 60 billion dirham expansion of Abu Dhabi's financial district on Al Maria Island, and this includes a lot of new office space as well that will be coming in the next couple of years. And this is another reason why I'm actually a big fan of investing in Al Maria Island and Reem Island, because those areas are going to directly benefit from this expansion that the government is doing. Another part of the plan was to create the cultural district, and they are completing that as we speak today. So they have already opened the Louvre, they already opened Team Lab Phenomena, they already opened the Zayed National Museum, and the Guggenheim Museum is also in the works and going to be handing over pretty shortly. It will be the world's largest Guggenheim Museum. So they have turned Saadiyat into the cultural district, or at least a large portion of Saadiyat. And they've made a phenomenal amount of progress when it comes to opening these different museums. And again, really making sure that the city is the culture capital of the UAE as well. Here's a nice picture of the Louvre from above. By the way, if you are finding this content interesting and you have any questions about Abu Dhabi real estate, maybe you are looking to buy something, whether it's at 1, 2, 3 million dirhams or 20, 30 million dirhams, feel free to reach out to me on WhatsApp or schedule a call below this video, and I'm happy to assist you with finding out what's currently available, what launches are coming, and what would be the best pick for you personally. When we are looking at hotels, again, the amount of hotel rooms that are available today is around 34 to 37,000 hotel rooms. So we are roughly halfway through the target. This is actually tracking a little bit behind the plan as well. And if we are looking at last year, April occupancy, it was 87%. So really high occupancy rate. Obviously, with some of the conflict that has been happening in the last few months, this number is drastically lower at the moment. But once things go back to normal, I expect occupancy to shot through the roof again, and it will be high in the future, again, once things calm down. Looking at the housing section of the plan, the current stock is around 400,000 homes today against nearly 700,000 home target. So again, here we also have quite a lot of growth that needs to happen, and the growth rate is actually interesting, right? If we look at it, the demand per year is around 6%, so it's growing at 6% a year, but the supply is only growing at 2.6% a year. So basically we have around twice as much demand, or actually more than that, than the amount of supply that's coming to the market. So this is also part of the reason why investing in Abu Dhabi, in my opinion, makes sense, because obviously this pushes real estate prices up. Here's just a picture of Hudayriyat Island, how this area is going to look like in the future when it's handed over. So just to take a quick look at some actual data and statistics, because I don't like to just, talk about things that sound cool. I like actual data. I like to look at actual transaction volume, price per square foot. This is two different screenshots from Abu Dhabi Real Estate Center's official website. So one of them is the total residential unit sales by period. and I put that on a yearly view. And then we also have a monthly view. So you can see clearly that from 2021, we have seen a huge growth in the amount of unit sales per year, around the 7 times growth actually. And 2026 is almost already closing in on last year's numbers, despite only being halfway through the year and a lot of it being in a time of conflict where investor confidence is at a much lower place. And even if you look at the monthly view, you can see that, for example, for the 5th month of the year, we are still just at around last year's numbers. So we haven't seen as drastic of a drop in terms of sales than what most people would have expected throughout this period of regional conflict, right? I'm not saying that the market hasn't been affected, because it definitely has been. And we have seen that in Dubai as well, where we get more data from the market. And also Abu Dhabi's real estate market is much smaller. There is less liquidity as of right now. So those things are worth noting. But no matter how you look at it, you can see that we are kind of entering this exponential phase of the market in Abu Dhabi if we are just looking at the chart. If we look at the residential unit sales financing, you can see that it's almost all cash sales. So the finance sales make up a very small portion of the market. This is on a quarterly view, which again gives the entire market more stability. The metro is behind, but the rail story is bigger. So Abu Dhabi Metro is still in its early stages. That was also a part of the 2030 plan for Abu Dhabi, but it is arriving, connectivity is arriving on a different track. So Etihad Rail is going to be hopefully handing over this year, and that is going to connect 11 cities. It's going to be a 900-kilometer national network, and it will cut down the travel time between Abu Dhabi to Dubai, or Dubai to Abu Dhabi, to under 1 hour. So that is also really good news, obviously. So the amount of supply on the market is actually much tighter than what was planned. And the reason for this is because the demand also didn't follow, the plan. It's actually way more than what people expected. So the 2030 plan set target for 3.1 million people. Abu Dhabi now has 4.14 million people, and it's growing at 7.5% a year. So the plan actually underestimated demand, and every supply restriction it built in order to protect the environment, manage growth, and also control the land is now operating inside a market larger and faster moving than the planners ever modeled. Let's talk about how the city is structured now. So you have 2 city centers, 3 supply tools, and 1 finite map. So Abu Dhabi was built around 2 city centers, not 1. We have the CBD, Al Marja Island, and basically this is like the finance, big business and commerce part of the city. The tallest buildings permitted here are up to 300 meters, and you have 10 plus bridges that are going to be spreading the traffic across the entire city. And then we have the capital district as well on the mainland. So this is, government, universities, hospitals, embassies, and more so mid-rise buildings, 5 to 10 stories max. They plan the entire city around these 2 centers, and then also all of the other islands surrounding these. So they have 3 legal tools on top of the geography, and this is how the supply stays controlled in Abu Dhabi. So first you have the sand belt. This is a ring of undeveloped land around the city, and nothing gets built beyond it except small designated desert villages. And this is basically like a permanent outer wall that they built into the master plan. Then we have the desert fingers. So these are undeveloped strips between coastal towns towards Dubai, preventing the entire coastline from becoming one unbroken sprawl. And then third, we have the green gradient. So islands legally classified by ecological sensitivity. These are the most protected national park islands that cannot be developed on. Full stop, ever. That was part of the plan in 2007. Now let's talk about some of these key zones and where they currently stand today. So first, Al Suba, or Al Marja Island as they call it now, Al Reem Island, and Al Mina, the CBD core. So this is the financial heart of the emirate, and currently we have 97% office occupancy in these areas. Al Mina being cut through with canals, so they are expanding the waterfront living area, and it's basically one of the Gulf's most supply constrained commercial zones. Every new tower is being absorbed almost immediately. So this is ADGM on Al Maria Island. Now let's talk about Saadiyat Island, a cultural district and also home to luxury living in Abu Dhabi. So you have 5 world-class museums already opened. You have building heights that are permanently capped. So this is one thing I really like about Abu Dhabi personally, that they are not allowing unlimited amount of skyscrapers, which really hurt, the city's connectivity. It creates a lot of traffic, and also just makes everything feel more cramped. So here on Saadiyat, the heights are capped. And also in the first half of 2025, Saadiyat led the luxury market. So it accounted for a majority of Abu Dhabi's luxury sales. If we look at some of the prices, Saadiyat has performed incredibly well, especially the front row strip of land that was closest to the beach. So just looking at some of the apartment prices in Mamsha Al Saadiyat, we have 9,000 dirhams per square foot prices for anything that's facing the sea, and for the ones that have partial sea view, they are around 5,000 dirhams a square foot. So insanely high. People who bought these just 5-6 years ago, they paid a third of this price. So that shows the amount of demand there is in Abu Dhabi for these modern luxurious buildings. A penthouse sold for $54.4 million, which is insane. It was like a 200 million dirham sale in the Four Seasons on Saadiyat. And then we also had the most expensive residential sale of Abu Dhabi happening last year for over $100 million. It was actually a 400 million dirham mansion sold also on Saadiyat Island. So we can see that luxury real estate is doing really well. These are all sales from last year, showing investor confidence even at these high prices. How did Yas Island do? So Yas Island was always planned as the entertainment destination of the Emirate, and it's a designation that cannot be replicated anywhere else. So we already have Formula One here, Warner Brothers, Harry Potter World. We have huge concerts, high occupancy rate for hotels here, and a lot more things coming up as well, such as Disneyland and the Sphere. We have a bunch of other things as well, like Ferrari World, but Yas has done really well in terms of both an appreciation play and also the amount of visitors that it attracts every single year. Then Hudayria, this is a location that has been really popular the last couple of weeks. And Hudayria has actually been in the plan for 18 years, right? So it was named in the 2030 plan, designated for waterfront communities with canals cut through and mangrove edges. So it was always meant to be like this beautiful natural island with a lot of beaches surrounding it, and positioned almost exactly halfway between CBD and the capital district. Here's a nice picture of Hudayria Island, and I just wanted to point this out that this has been in the plans for almost 20 years, and now they are actually fully building it and activating the master plan of it. And you're still not late. Like if you're buying on Hudayria now when it's mostly sand, I believe in a couple of years, maybe 5, 10, 15 years, you could be one of those people like those who bought the Palm Jumeirah when it was just sand. A lot of people don't see this image yet clearly in their head. And that's why the prices, reflect that as well. A lot of people just lack that imagination to see past the fact that it's a lot of sand on that island and those hills. But once this is going to fully develop, and it will because it's the plan of the government, it's going to be such an incredible place to live in the UAE. Now, when it comes to the capital district, the stable employment zone, it has also done really well. There is basically an expected 5.8% GDP growth for Abu Dhabi in this sector as well. And another part that is pretty interesting is Lulu Island. So this is also part of the master plan. This is at the tip of the Abu Dhabi island, 400 hectares. And the maximum height that is allowed across it is 3 stories. It's basically going to be and is a cultural site, and Lulu means pearl in Arabic, by the way. This is how it looks. Amazing looking island from the Corniche. Now let's talk about why all of this demand surge that we have seen in the last year for Abu Dhabi still hasn't turned into a bubble. First of all, the land is only released as fast as the market can absorb. So the 2030 plan actually commits the government in writing to release land only at a pace that the market can genuinely absorb it. Even if the demand outgrows the amount of land available, they are still not going to release more. They are not allowing developers to build more because they are trying to learn from some of the mistakes that Dubai has made in terms of its city planning and just avoid it completely. So that's why basically, even though we've seen a lot more investors flocking into the Abu Dhabi market, it's still structurally undersupplied. And if you think that this is a market that's out of balance, then you can just look at these numbers, right, from last year. And this is not what an out of balance market looks like in most people's eyes. So when you're investing in Abu Dhabi in a good area by a good developer and a good project, then you are not just making a bet on the market, you're basically taking a position inside of a managed system. That's how Abu Dhabi is run, right? This is what you're buying into. It's a managed system that has already beaten its own targets from 20 years ago in multiple fronts by a lot. And essentially, they have a plan that they set out. It's really well thought out, created by some of the world-leading city planning experts in the world and economists. And then you can take a small position of that and just ride the long-term wave. This is the 3-question framework that I personally like to use. And here's how I like to evaluate a zone. Is it part of the 2030 plan? If it is, then it has government-backed supply management, designated infrastructure, and structural demand behind of it. If it's not part of it, then you might be speculating without all of that support. Then second of all, is there actual infrastructure committed here already? Where there are things like rails, roads and utilities committed, the density will follow. And then the third question is this product irreplaceable? If you have anything that's waterfront, Gulf adjacent, island location, or cultural proximity, once that land is allocated, then it's gone. There is no second version of it. So ideally, you want to choose a location where it is an irreplaceable product and one of a kind, and is also part of the 2030 plan. So this was the 2007 baseline and the 2030 target, and where we stand today. As you can see, most of the plan has already been done, and most of it have been actually exceeded by quite a lot. So the question isn't whether this market works. The evidence shows that it does. The question is whether you are in it before the remaining land is allocated. Most people making decisions here in this real estate market are doing it without this context, without looking through the master plan and what the city actually wants for the long term. This is where the numbers come from for my research. And again, if you're thinking about investing in Abu Dhabi, it's a big decision, right? You want to give it the proper thought. It's not something you want to rush because it's a more stable and long-term market. You are probably going to be holding your position for 5, 7, 10 years. It's not a flipping market like how a lot of people treated Dubai or some of the other parts of the Emirate. In Abu Dhabi, in my opinion, you should buy if you want to either live in that place or if you are willing to hold long term and be okay with the fact that there isn't as much liquidity in it. If you are okay with it, then you can make amazing gains, most likely in the long term, just like how the people did in Mamsha Sadiyat. But it's not something you want to rush because you will be holding that position for the long term. So if you want to talk about options, regardless of what your budget is, feel free to reach out to me on WhatsApp, or also you can schedule a call in the description down below. And if you want to download these slides, then you also have an option for that in the description down below. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please share it with someone if you think it was useful, and I will see you in the next one.